The story of Mistral AI begins with three French researchers who shared both a vision and an educational background. Arthur Mensch, Guillaume Lampel and Timothée Lacroix all met at École Polytechnique, one of France's most prestigious engineering schools, but their paths diverged before converging again. Mensch went to Google DeepMind, where he worked on some of the most advanced language models in the world. Lampel and Lacroix both joined Meta Platforms, contributing to the company's artificial intelligence research efforts, when they reunited in April 2023 to found Mistral AI. They brought together decades of combined experience from the very labs that were defining the cutting edge of AI development. What happened next was remarkable by any standard. In June 2023, just 2 months after the company's founding, Mistral announced a seed round of €105 million. That amount was eye-catching for such a young company. But it was only the beginning. Investors saw something special in what these three founders were building. They recognized that Europe desperately needed its own champion in the race to develop large language models, a homegrown alternative to the American giants that dominated the field. The funding momentum continued unabated. By September 2025, Mistral had secured a staggering €2 billion in investment, pushing its valuation to €12 billion, roughly $14 billion. The company had transformed from a promising startup into Europe's leading developer of large language models. Its workforce had grown to 350 employees by 2025, a testament to both the company's ambition and the talent it was able to attract for Europe. Mistral represented something more than just another tech company. It was proof that the continent could compete at the highest levels of artificial intelligence development, retaining both innovation and technological sovereignty within its borders. This financing round marks a significant departure for Mistral. Until now, the company had relied exclusively on equity funding to fuel its growth. Investors like Asmel Andreessen Horowitz, Lightspeed, and General Catalyst poured money into the company. In exchange for ownership stakes, that approach made sense for Mistral's early years, when the company needed flexible capital to hire researchers, develop models, and figure out its commercial strategy. Equity investors understand that kind of risk. They are betting on long-term potential rather than immediate returns. But building a data center is different. It requires massive upfront spending on physical assets that generate predictable cash flows over time. Banks are comfortable lending against those kinds of assets. The chips, the power infrastructure, the facility itself, all of it can serve as collateral. That is why Mistral turned to debt financing for this project. 7 European banks backed the deal, including Bpifrance, BNP Paribas Credit Agricole, SIB, HSBC, La Banque Postale, MAFG, and Natixis. Corporate and investment banking. The choice of lenders is worth noting. These are not venture capital firms looking for the next big thing. They are traditional financial institutions making a calculated bet that Mistral can generate enough revenue from its data center to pay back the loan with interest for the banks. This is infrastructure finance, not startup investing. The terms reflect that reality debt is generally cheaper than equity, because lenders get paid back before shareholders see any returns. If Mistral had raised another equity round, it would have diluted existing shareholders and signaled that the company still needed external validation. Debt signals something different. It says Mistral has assets banks are willing to back and revenue streams they trust. The facility rising in Briars-le-Châtel represents something genuinely ambitious. This small commune, south of Paris, will soon house one of Europe's most powerful AI computing installations. At its heart will sit 13800 Nvidia GB30 Grace Blackwell G+, the newer generation of chips that Mistral has selected for this project that represents a notable shift from earlier plans which had called for the previous GB20 generation. The upgrade makes sense given how quickly AI hardware evolves. Why commit to yesterday's technology when tomorrow's is already available? The raw numbers tell a compelling story. The data center will deliver 44 megawatts of compute capacity. To put that in perspective, the International Energy Agency estimates this represents roughly 1.5 times the power consumption of a conventional data center. We are talking about serious computational muscle here. The kind of infrastructure needed to train and run large language models at scale. Mistral is not building this alone. The company has partnered with École, a French data center operator that owns and runs the Briars-le-Châtel facility. This arrangement allows Mistral to lease space in an existing facility rather than constructing something from scratch. The partnership model makes practical sense, letting Mistral focus on what it does best, while École handles the physical infrastructure. The timeline targets the second quarter of 2026 for full operations. That gives the team roughly a year to install thousands of G+, configure the systems, and bring everything online. It is an aggressive schedule, but achievable for a company that has moved quickly since its founding. When complete, this facility will serve as the backbone for Mistral's model training and inference workloads, providing the computational foundation that European AI development desperately needs. Arthur Mensch has been very clear about what he thinks is at stake. When he talks about Mistral, he does not just talk about building better models or competing on benchmarks. He talks about independence. His statement that Europe needs an ambitious AI cloud infrastructure and an independent AI stack is not just corporate positioning. It is a direct response to a genuine anxiety that many European institutions feel. The concern is straightforward. If you rely on American cloud providers for your artificial intelligence, you are essentially renting someone else's infrastructure to process your most sensitive data. That creates obvious problems for governments. It creates problems for large enterprises with proprietary information. It creates problems for research institutions working on sensitive projects. Mistral is positioning itself as the answer to those problems. The company wants to be the sovereign alternative to OpenAI and Anthropic, a European option for organizations that want control over their entire AI environment. This is not theoretical. Mistral already counts the French military among its clients. That relationship tells you something important about the trust that government institutions are placing in a homegrown AI company. When a defense organization chooses to work with Mistral, they are making a calculation about where their data is safest and who they want controlling the infrastructure that processes it. Mensch is betting that more organizations across Europe will make the same calculation. His argument is that you cannot really be sovereign in artificial intelligence if you are dependent on someone else's cloud. That is the vision driving this expansion. It is about building the entire stack in Europe, from the chips to the models to the services that run on top of them. Mistral's ambitions extend well beyond the Paris region. The company is thinking in continental terms, and that means building infrastructure in multiple countries simultaneously. Just before announcing the Briars-le-Châtel project, Mistral revealed a separate investment worth $1.4 billion in Sweden. This partnership with École Data Center will establish AI infrastructure in the Nordic region, creating a geographic distribution that makes strategic sense for a company serving clients across Europe. The Swedish facility forms one piece of a larger puzzle. Mistral has set a concrete target of deploying 200 megawatts of compute capacity across Europe by the end of 2027. To put that number in perspective, it represents roughly the computing power of 2 hyperscale data centers. That is the kind of infrastructure typically associated with the largest American technology companies, not European startups. But Mistral is no longer operating like a startup. It is building like a major technology company. The most striking announcement came with plans for what Mistral calls the biggest artificial intelligence campus in Europe. This facility would bring up to 1.4 gigawatts of power online in France before 2030. That represents an enormous leap in scale. The project involves partnerships with Nvidia and MGX, an investment fund based in the United Arab Emirates. These alliances bring together the computing hardware expertise of Nvidia, the financial resources of Gulf state investors, and Mistral's vision for European AI infrastructure. The message is clear: Mistral intends to compete directly with the largest AI companies in the world, and it is assembling the resources to do exactly that. When you look at the numbers, the scale of the challenge facing Mistral becomes clear. The company has raised a total of about $2.9 billion. That is an impressive sum for a European startup. But compare that to OpenAI, which has secured roughly $180 billion, or Anthropic with around $59 billion. The gap is enormous. Mistral is punching well above its weight. But the financial muscle of its American rivals is on a completely different level. What Mistral has built with that smaller pool of capital is remarkable. The company offers Le Chat, its answer to chat, and rolled out mobile applications. In February of 2025, users can subscribe to the Pro tier for $14.99 a month. The company has also secured meaningful partnerships. Microsoft put $16 million into Mistral and integrated its models into Azure. The French shipping giant CMA-CGM invested 100 million euros. These relationships give Mistral credibility and distribution. Perhaps most importantly, Mistral has embraced an open-weight approach to its models. This means developers can download and modify the underlying technology, unlike the closed systems from OpenAI and Anthropic. That philosophy has attracted a loyal following among researchers and companies who want more control over their AI tools. By capital raised, Mistral now stands as the leading European developer of large language models. It is a champion for the continent, but a champion fighting against opponents with vastly deeper pockets.